Alright, good morning, Sec 1s. So welcome to your second lecture. This is lecture 6.2. We are going to be finding out and discovering what actually makes up a typical cell. Okay, so basically some questions that we want to find out is, since a cell is a basic building block of life, alright, that means all living things, whether animal or plant, will all be made out of cells. So there are two major types of cells that we'll be talking about, and number one, that will be your plant cell, and number two, that will be your animal cells. Okay, so some questions that we will think is, what are the different parts of the cell? Because a cell is just a small circular structure or rectangular structure, which you will see later on, and there are actually different parts inside a cell, and the different parts of the cell basically have different functions. For example, if you look at a factory, a biscuit factory, okay, and in a biscuit factory, so let me draw a factory over here first. Okay, so in a biscuit factory, there are different rooms. Now, the different rooms in the biscuit factory actually have got different functions. Okay, so for example, if your factory, okay, so let's say you have a, let's not talk about a factory, let's talk about a house. Okay, you have different rooms in the house. So for example, one of the parts in the house could be the kitchen. Another one would be the toilet, and another one will be the bedroom. So you might ask yourself, does the kitchen have the function? Yes, so the kitchen is the area where you cook or where you eat, and the toilet is where you bathe or you brush your teeth or you do your shower or you go to you have your own business there, right? And then your bedroom is an area where you can watch TV, you play computer games, you lie on the bed, you take a rest. So the different rooms in the house basically has got different functions. So just like a cell, if we were to pretend that a cell, okay, is like a house, different parts of the cell basically has got different functions. And all these parts must work together, okay, they must work together in order for the cell to be able to carry out its function. Okay, now the last question that we'll be looking at would be, what are the similarities and the differences between an animal and a plant cell? Alright, they're actually quite different, so we're going to be looking at it today. Alright, on. Okay, so let's have a look at this. So the many key points that we're going to take away from this is that all animals and plants are made out of cells. Alright, the next thing is that most cells have got three main parts. And the parts are the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and the cell membrane. Now later on, you will be able to see this in your slide, and we're going to find out what are the different functions of the nucleus, the cytoplasm, and the cell membrane. Alright? The next thing is that plant cells, because they are different organisms as compared to animals, they will have more parts as compared to a animal cell, okay, and primarily they basically have chloroplast and a cell wall. Now some of you may have already learned these terms back in primary school, so it shouldn't be difficult for you. Alright, now at any time when you meet with a blank, you must remember to pause the video so that you will be able to copy the blank in your notes. Alright, so all plants and animals are made out of cells. So you can see that this is a plant cell. Okay, so your leaf is made out of millions of these plant cells. This fox here, because it is an animal, is made out of animal cell. Now you can see some differences already in terms of the structure. Alright, and remember, you can only see these cells this big because we are actually using a microscope, which will allow us to enlarge the very extremely small cells. Okay. So this is a microscopic photograph of your human cheek cell. Now this is done at 400 times zoom. So can you imagine how small actually is your cheek cells? You can see that the dark little purple dot in the middle here, this is your nucleus. You can see that the surrounding area here is the cell membrane, and the inside pinky structure is known as a cytoplasm. So generally all cells have got a cell membrane, a nucleus, and a cytoplasm. Okay, CNC. So where are your cheeks? Your cheeks are here, right? So how do you think they actually managed to get a cheek cell? What they would have done is they would have taken a swab, just a bit like your COVID swab, but that is done through the nose. They would have taken the swab and they would have scraped the inside part of your cheek cells. They would have then used the microscope to enlarge the picture of your cheek cells. That's what scientists or even researchers in the research labs in hospitals, okay, and research organizers, that's how they actually do a microscopic slide. Alright, so you notice the shape of these cells here. This is an animal cell, alright, because these are your cheek cells. And this is one fun fact. This is where you will pause a video to actually write down, alright, fill in the blanks in your notes. The largest cell in the human body is actually the ovum, which is the female egg. Okay, the female egg is actually produced by the ovaries of a female. It is actually used during sexual reproduction. It's very important in sexual reproduction. Now, the largest cell of all animals, if you can guess, what is it? You're right, it's actually an ostrich egg. Okay, the ostrich egg can vary in size, but the smallest is probably about the size of your head, the circumference of your head, the outer structure of your head. Okay, that is basically one of the smallest ostrich eggs already. An ostrich egg can even be bigger than that. All right. Okay, so let's have a look at this. This is inside your slide. If you look at 6.2 under lesson trigger, now this is a unicellular organism. Now remember from your previous lecture, unicellular is a one-cell organism. It's only made up of one cell. So over here, you can see it's made up of one cell. But in this one cell, you can see there are many different parts in the cell, right? There seems to be this black dot here. There seems to be a big transparent little circular here, as well as some circles here and some circles inside the cell. So we say that the euglena actually has got both plant and animal features. When we say features, means that it has got some parts that are like for plant cells and some parts that are like animal cells. Okay, so how is it like to be a plant cell? Now remember, plants are the only organisms in this world that are able to photosynthesize. Now you would have learned this word. Photosynthesize comes from the word photosynthesis. That means they will trap light energy to make food for the plants. So in order for plant cells to do that, they must have a special structure. And this structure is known as a chloroplast. Okay? So plant cells are the only cells that will have chloroplast because only plant cells can photosynthesize. So you remember, if you do not need to sleep in your house, you wouldn't need to build a bedroom. Alright, so if your cell doesn't need to photosynthesize, it does not need to have a chloroplast. Okay? And if you look carefully at this cell, it doesn't have a cell wall. Later we will learn about it. So that's why it's not an animal cell. Okay, now euglena cells actually have got a lot of oil. So if you look at all this greenish structure here, this green shaded area here, which you can't really see in your notes, but you can see on the slide, this is actually oil droplets, and they have got a lot of oil, and that's why euglena can actually be used as an alternative source of energy because it's able to release oil, and this oil is actually used to produce aviation fluid. Now aviation fuel, aviation means anything that's got to do with aeroplanes, alright, and they actually use it as fuel for the aeroplanes. Okay, so other than the nucleus, the cell actually has got many different parts. Okay, now, and that's why we say it is a cell model. Just like your model of your solid, liquid, and gases, you have all the small discrete particles, right, showing all the particles that are inside solid, liquid, and gas. So just like a cell, they have got different parts to show you what it's actually like inside a cell. That's why we say a cell is a very good model because it's able to show you clearly, alright, and obviously what are some of these structures and parts of a cell. Okay, so it will also allow us to determine, by looking at the model and the labels and the diagrams, it will allow us to determine whether this cell is an animal or a plant cell. Alright, so let's turn to your slide 6.2. This is your notes here under 6.2. Let's learn to label the different parts of the cell. Now this outer part of the cell is known as the cell membrane. Now, in English, membrane just means covering, and membrane also means that it has got many pores, many holes. Now, I'm sure you just finished your chapter of separation techniques. You would have known that when Singapore actually produces our own clean water via the new water technology, we actually use a membrane. Now, membranes are basically thin structures, and these thin structures actually have got tiny holes. Okay, they have tiny holes. So the cell membrane actually has got tiny holes, and that is why the cell membrane is known as partially permeable. So later on, we will talk about what is the meaning of partially permeable. Permeable just means that it allows things to go through. And why does it allow things to pass through? Because of these holes. But because these holes are very tiny, only small particles can pass through. Large particles that are too big will get stuck. That's why we say that the cell membrane is only partially permeable, because only tiny or small molecules can pass through or can enter the cell membrane. Alright, this is something that is quite important that you may want to think about later. Right, so let's move on. The next one that you will see inside the cell membrane, inside the cell, is this big, huge structure here, this purple structure here that I'm pointing to. Now, this purple structure is known as the nucleus. The nucleus is also known as the boss of the cell. So if you think about it, what does the boss of a company do? The boss of the company basically tells all its workers to do this, you do that, right? So the nucleus is like the boss of a cell. It basically controls what the cell does. Now, inside this bluish structure, you can see all these long curly whirly threads that are purple in color, right? Now, these threads that are purple in color, they are known as chromosomes. Now, chromosomes are also known as DNA. Let me just, in a very simple sentence, tell you what DNA is. DNA is basically instructions that your body will follow to make something. For example, if you want to make a chocolate cake, you will have to follow the chocolate cake recipe. I think all of you, you will know, right? If you want to set up your iPhone, you must follow the manual, or you must go online to YouTube and follow an instruction. So the recipe is like an instruction. It will tell you step 1, put this, step 2, put this. So basically, your chromosomes are basically DNA in your body. This DNA is very important because how come you are tall? How come you are short? How come you have single eyelid or double eyelid? How come you can roll your tongue? How come some of you cannot roll your tongue? How come some of you, your earlobes are attached? Some of your earlobes are not attached? These are all instructions that are found in the chromosomes, which are inside the nucleus. So again, this is the nucleus, and this is the boss of the cell. Inside the nucleus, you can see all these thread-like long strings, right? These string-like structures are known as chromosomes, which are your DNA. They are very important. Now, inside the cell, besides your nucleus, you have this liquid known as your cytoplasm. Your cytoplasm is basically a jelly-like substance. After this lecture, you will actually be doing an SLS lesson package 2, and there will be a video inside there that will show you what is a cytoplasm really like. Okay, basically it's something like jelly, but it's not as hard as jelly. It's like when your jelly becomes a little bit more liquidy, you know? And then you have all these structures over here that are yellowish in color. These are vacuoles. These vacuoles are known as tiny spaces. Now, these tiny spaces they are also covered by a membrane. So these tiny spaces, they are not empty. They will contain air, they will contain liquid, and sometimes they will also contain food, because the cell is a living thing, so it needs to have nutrients as well. So it will also contain food. So if you look at this cell, notice if you don't have a cell membrane, the cell will not be held together, because the cytoplasm is liquid, right? It will all just come out. So in order for you to hold the cell together, you need to have a cell membrane. So Miss Lee will always think that the cell membrane is like a plastic bag. Then this plastic bag, if I pour liquid inside the plastic bag, that is my cytoplasm. Then I put all the different structures inside my cytoplasm. I put my nucleus, and inside my nucleus, I put my chromosome. Then I put my vacuoles inside my cytoplasm, and I actually form an animal cell. So now we are going to zoom in, alright, to talk about the different structures of the animal cell and what are the functions. You will need to pay very close attention, because after this lecture and your SLS lesson, you will need to do the simple cutting activity, which will ask you to cut out the animal cell and to do the proper labeling, description and the function. Okay, so at any point of time, you must pause the lecture in order for you to complete your notes. So now let's move on to the third slide on this page. So what is your cytoplasm? The first thing you have to copy, it is a jelly-like substance. Okay, now Miss Lee is going to highlight some of the terms here, so that you will be able to know what are some of the key terms, alright? So your cytoplasm is jelly-like. Now your cytoplasm is basically this bluish structure that you see all around. It's a little bit like it's basically like the swimming pool water of your swimming pool. Okay, so if your swimming pool has got no swimming pool water, how are you going to swim inside, right? So this is basically your cytoplasm. Your cytoplasm contains chemicals and organelles that carry out special functions. Now, okay, so what are organelles? So this one is an important term. It also contains chemicals. It also contains jelly-like substance. So organelles are basically structures. So your nucleus is also an organelle. Your vacuoles are also organelles. Alright, so it contains not only chemicals, it also contains organelles such as your nucleus and your vacuoles that have got special function. The next thing about your cytoplasm is it is the site where your chemical reactions take place. Now, what is the meaning of the word site? Site just means like construction site. It just means location. Okay, so let me spell the word out for you. Site actually means location. Alright, so it serves as the location where many chemical reactions take place. Alright, so that is basically your cytoplasm. So let's move on. Okay, so the next thing that you will need to know is basically your cell membrane. Now, your cell membrane is a thin membrane surrounding your cell. Alright, it's partially permeable. Why do we say it's partially permeable? Because just now Miss Lee mentioned already. So I will just revisit what we mentioned just now. Okay, it is permeable because it has got tiny holes. Okay, it has got tiny holes around the membrane. And why is it partially? Because these holes are tiny. So that means they only allow small substances to pass through. That's why we say certain. So what are certain substances? Substances that are small enough to pass through or enter the cell membrane. We say that it is a boundary between the cell and the external environment. So this is the inside of the cell, this is the outside of the cell. So you can see that your cell membrane is like a boundary. A boundary is like a border. Okay, it's like a fence or a wall. Okay, so this acts as a separation between the inside of the cell and the outside of the cell. Now, because it is partially permeable and it only allows small substances to pass through, we say that it is very important because it controls substances entering or leaving the cell. So it's like your security guard. Now you look at the Uncle and Broderick Secondary School. Basically, the Uncle and Broderick Secondary School will prevent visitors from entering the school without permission. So you have to look at the visitor's ID or the visitor's pass, right? Same thing, your cell membrane is also like a security guard. It prevents certain things from entering and it also prevents certain things from exiting the cell. Alright, because it is, what is that big word? We say that it is partially permeable. Alright, means only certain things can pass through. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's have a look at this simple animation. This is the inside of the cell and this is the outside of the cell. Okay, so you can see that it only allows which color of the circles to pass through. Let's start again. So on the outside of the cell, you have yellow and orange, right? But what happens? The cell membrane only allows material B to pass through. That means material B will be able to enter the cell membrane into the cell, but not material A. So we say it is partially permeable because only certain substances can pass through. So you must copy the word partially permeable and the word certain. Certain means only some substances can pass through, and it's usually the substances that are small enough that can pass through. So what happens if the substances are too big? They will be either stuck on the outside or they will be stuck on the inside because they cannot pass through the size of the holes. It is too big. Alright, so let's turn over to the next page. So let's talk about our nucleus. Now, our nucleus is the largest structure. I would like you to also now change the word structure. Now, remember, structure is basically also known as your organelle. Remember, organelle is any structure inside your cell. So this is also known as your organelle. Okay, and all your organelles are inside the cytoplasm, which is the jelly-like substance. Okay, so we say that your nucleus is the largest structure. Please highlight largest structure and its circular shape. Now, the most important thing about your nucleus is that it is involved in reproduction. That means it is very important when cells want to reproduce. Okay, when cells want to reproduce, it is very important to have the nucleus. Now, why is it important to have the nucleus? Because the nucleus contains all your genetic material known as chromosomes. Now, you might ask me, the word genetic sounds very familiar. It sounds like jeans, not your denim jeans that you wear. Okay, genes are basically found on your DNA. Now, Miss Lee already mentioned just now, your DNA is also known as the blueprint of life. That means your DNA will tell your body exactly how it will look like. Why is it you have double eyelid? Why is it you can roll your tongue? These are all instructions given by your DNA. So the first function is involved in reproduction because it contains your genetic material. Next thing, your nucleus also helps to repair worn out parts. That means when cells are old and they are damaged and they need to be replaced and repaired, your nucleus is also very important in this, okay? So it will help cells to repair itself. Alright? And next thing is very important because it helps to keep the cell alive. So there are four main functions of your nucleus. Number one is involved in reproduction when cells want to make more cells, because it contains genes or what we consider your genetic material. So your genes or your genetic material are these strings inside here. These are known as your chromosomes. Alright, so these are your genetic material. It's important because it helps to repair worn out. The word worn out means cells that are old and they are injured, so they need to be replaced. And the next thing is it helps to keep the cell alive. Okay, so let's move on. So these are your chromosomes. Alright, you can see that your chromosomes are very long and they are thread-like because it looks like thread, right? It looks like strings. Okay, and basically these are your genetic material because it contains genes. So just now Miss Lee already mentioned, so you may want to highlight these important keywords that I will share with you. Okay, so number one, it's long, it's in the nucleus. It contains genes, and these genes will have genetic material that will determine heredity. Now, this is a very big word, okay? What is heredity? Heredity just means that you get these genes from your parents, okay? So, if your parents have double eyelid, most likely you may also have double eyelid. So that's the meaning of heredity. Okay, so you take genes from your parents because you are a product of your parents. That's why we say it is passed down from parents to offspring. Now the English word offspring is very, very complicated. Actually, it means child. Okay, now some of you might be very concerned. You might say, wow, Miss Lee, must we memorize all this? Not to worry. Okay, you just have to remember that chromosomes contains genes. They are DNA. That means they contain genetic material. That's all you need to know. You don't have to complicate yourself further because we will study this when you are in Sec 3. Okay, so it's very interesting now. So I'm sure all of you are talking about the COVID-19, right? And they are saying that, scientists have already determined the DNA for COVID-19. That means they are able to determine that what are the genes that are present inside the particular virus. So they study the DNA and the chromosomes of all these viruses as well. Okay, let's move on. All right. So, let's have a look at your vacuole. Okay, so your vacuole is a fluid-filled space in the cytoplasm. It is also surrounded by a membrane and it contains water and other nutrients that is important for the cell to survive. Okay, now the first difference between animal and plant cells is that your animal cells, the vacuoles, are very small and they are many. That means they are numerous, many, and they are temporary in animal cells. Temporary means they don't exist permanently there. Okay, however, in your plant cells, you will notice, let's have a look at this picture of the animal cell. You can count so many small vacuoles, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So many. But if you look at the plant cell, you can only see one very big rectangular empty space here that Miss Lee is drawing out for you. Now this is a vacuole, and you will notice compared to the animal cell, there is only one very big vacuole in a plant cell. So plant cells also have vacuoles, just like animal cells, but the difference is the number and the size. Plant cells only have one large vacuole surrounded by a membrane as well, okay, and it is in the center. You notice this rectangular space here, which is your vacuole surrounded by a cell membrane, is in the center. But if you look at the animal cell, it is all over the cytoplasm of the animal cell. There is no fixed position in that sense. Now, the plant cells basically contain plant sap. Now, plant sap just means a liquid, and the liquid, similar to your animal cells, it contains water and sugars and food. Now, water and sugar is very important for the plant cells to survive as well. They also contain mineral salts. You may want to pause the video here because I know that you have quite a number of blanks to fill up. Okay. So welcome back. Now, Miss Lee would just like you to take your highlighter so that you can highlight some of the very important keywords on this slide here that is related to your vacuole. So number 1, you might ask yourself, remember, let's look at the different cells. Okay, so your animal cells, vacuoles are small, there are many, but your plant cell, alright, is only single, only one large, and it's in the center. So this is your plant vacuole. Okay, and your plant vacuole basically is, both of them are surrounded by membranes, okay, and it is filled with water and nutrients. In your plant is actually known as your plant sap. It's filled with water, dissolved sugars, and mineral salts. Okay, so it will be good for you to take note of all these keywords. Now let's move on to the next slide. So we're now going to be looking at the difference, what's inside a typical plant cell that the animal cell actually does not have. Okay, so the next slide shows you 2 structures that the plant cell has that the animal cell does not have. The first one is actually known as a cell wall. Okay, so this is your cell wall. You might be wondering what is your cell wall. So let Miss Lee show it to you. Now your cell wall is basically, the first difference is that your cell wall is a very thick layer. And this cell wall is surrounding the cell membrane. So it's like an additional wall outside the wall. Okay, so if you look very carefully, this is your cell membrane, right? It's pointing to the cell membrane. So your cell wall is over here. Okay. So this is your cell membrane, this is your cell wall. Alright, so your cell wall is a very thick layer. It is made up of a type of sugar known as cellulose. Cellulose is actually a very strong carbohydrate. So your cell wall really helps to support the cell. When we say it supports the cell, that means it gives the cell a shape. Okay, it helps to support it by making the shape of the cell look like this. Alright, now the next organelle that the plant cell has, which the animal cell does not have, is that it has chloroplasts. So these are the chloroplasts here. Okay, you see you have the nucleus. Animal cell also got nucleus. Animal cell also got chromosomes. Animal cells also got vacuoles, cytoplasm, and cell membrane. The two things that it doesn't have, number one, cell wall, and difference number two, it doesn't have it has a chloroplast. Okay, now the chloroplast contains a green pigment known as chlorophyll. Now, chloroplast contains chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is very important because it's involved in photosynthesis, which you learn in primary school. The plant is able to absorb sunlight and make food. Alright, so without chlorophyll and the chloroplast, the plant cell is unable to photosynthesize. Okay, so let me just show you very quickly. This is a microscopic picture of an onion cell. This is a picture of a cheek cell. These are some pictures of your red blood cell, which is found inside your blood, and this is found in potato cells. Now they do have some common features. So I'm going to ask you now to look at the slide with the table, animal cell and plant cell. We're going to talk about the similarities between the animal and the plant cell. Okay, so you may want to pause the video here to copy down in your notes. Animal cells and plant cells all have nucleus. That's why we say yes, it has nucleus. Does it have chromosomes? Of course, because chromosomes contain DNA. And your plants also need to have DNA because DNA will basically tell the plant how to look like, how many number of leaves to produce, how many number of fruits to have. Okay, do they both have a cell membrane? Yes, and both the cell membranes are partially permeable. The difference is, do your animal cells photosynthesize? Do your animal cells make food by using light? The answer is no. And because they don't photosynthesize, they do not need chloroplasts. But your plant cells photosynthesize, so they need chloroplasts, and you only find chloroplasts in green plants. So you might ask, Miss Lee, so if the plant is not green, it doesn't have chloroplasts? Yes, it doesn't have chloroplasts. Because chloroplast contains chlorophyll, which is green in color. Remember, chloroplast, anything with chloro means it's got chloroplast, it's got chlorophyll, which is green in color. Do they have cytoplasm? Yes, both of them have cytoplasm. But if you look at the structure of the plant cell, okay, you can see that the shape of the plant cell, the space of the cytoplasm is taken up majority by the vacuole. So the vacuole occupies a very large space. So the cytoplasm, which is this greenish liquid here, only occupies a smaller space as compared to your animal cell. Because your animal cell, the vacuoles are very small, right? But your plant cell, the vacuole is so big. So it's like pushing the chloroplast towards the side of the cell. Okay, so we say that the cytoplasm actually fills up the entire cell for an animal, whereas for your plant cell, the cytoplasm is also present but only towards the side of the cell because the big vacuole is pushing the cytoplasm towards the side of the cell. Now, your vacuoles are small and numerous in animal cells, and your vacuole is basically only one or few large vacuoles. But usually plant cells, when we only draw one very large vacuole, and it's in the center of the cell, and it's filled with cell sap. Now remember what is cell sap? Cell sap is basically, alright, water and dissolved sugars and mineral salts. In your animal cells, you will have water and other nutrients as well. But to make the difference between animal vacuole and plant vacuole, we say that animal vacuole is filled with liquid, which is food and water. Plant cell is filled with sap, and sap is actually also water, food for the plants, and mineral salts. Okay, so you may want to pause the video here to help you to fill up the table. Okay, welcome back. The next part of the cell which we'll be talking about that is different is that the cell wall is not present in your animal cells. So means animal cells don't have cell wall, but plant cells have a cell wall. Okay, so the cell wall is basically outside of the cell membrane. Alright, so we have come to our last slide now. Now, in our last slide, we're actually going to watch a video. Now, this video is going to allow you to help you to draw the animal and the plant cell in the space below. So, please watch the video so that you will be able to draw the typical animal and plant cell. So, we'll be looking at this slide here. Okay, so as you are watching the video, you may want to pause the video so that you are able to draw the respective parts of the cell.
Parts of a cell. All living things are made of microscopic units called cells. Two kinds of cells are plant and animal cells. How cells work to keep living things alive is truly amazing. Cells are made of parts called organelles. Each organelle has a specific job to perform in order to keep the cell functioning. The cell membrane is a semi-permeable layer that surrounds organelles. The job of the cell membrane is similar to a doorway. Just like a door lets things in and out of a room, the cell membrane lets materials in and out of the cell. Although the cell membrane is the outer layer of the animal cell, it is not the outer layer of a plant cell. Plant cells are surrounded by a rigid outer layer called the cell wall. The job of the cell wall is similar to that of a brick wall. Just like a brick wall gives structure and support to a building, a cell's cell wall gives structure and support to a plant cell. In fact, a cell wall prevents the plant cell from bursting when the plant absorbs water. The nucleus is another organelle inside of the cell. The nucleus can be thought of as the control center of the cell. Just like your brain is in control of your body, the nucleus is in control of the cell. However, it is the genetic material, or DNA, inside of the nucleus that determines everything about the cell. The DNA determines the type of the cell and when the cell will replicate. Vacuoles are found in both plant and animal cells. However, the size varies between the two cells. Vacuoles are storage tanks for water. Just like a water tower holds water, a vacuole stores water inside of the cell. In plant cells, you will find a large vacuole, and in animal cells, look for multiple smaller vacuoles. Another part of the cell is the chloroplast. This organelle is found only in plant cells and is the location of photosynthesis. Here, solar energy is used to create food for the plant. Chloroplasts are not found in animal cells because animals must consume food as their main source of energy. The mitochondria is an organelle that takes nutrients in, breaks them down to produce energy for the cell in the process of cellular respiration. You can think of the mitochondria as the powerhouse of the cell because it makes energy. Although mitochondria are found in both plant and animal cells, the majority of mitochondria will be found in animal cells. All organelles are suspended inside of a gel-like substance called cytoplasm. Just like a gelatin dessert with fruit inside, a cell has cytoplasm with organelles inside. Plant and animal cells are both similar and different. Both plant and animal cells have a cell membrane. However, there's only a cell wall in plant cells. A nucleus can be found in both plant and animal cells along with a vacuole. Chloroplasts are only found in plant cells.
This one that we were talking about, this is a very good summary. It tells you now the Venn diagram, anything that is in the middle is basically the ones that are similar. So in all plant cells, you have a nucleus, a cytoplasm, a cell membrane. Now you do not have this inside your notes, but a mitochondria is basically the battery. Now you know what, if you don't put battery inside a torchlight, the torchlight cannot work because it doesn't have energy. So your mitochondria is basically like the powerhouse or the energy of a cell. It will give energy for the cell to grow, to reproduce, and to move. Alright, all cells also, plant animal cells also have got vacuoles. The only difference is the size and the number. But plant cells have got two additional organelles that the animal cells does not have, two structures. The one organelle that it has, that the animal cell does not have, is your chloroplast, which contains chlorophyll that is green. Therefore, plant cells can photosynthesize to make their own food. Animal cells don't need that because animal cells eat in order to get our energy, but plants don't. Okay, and then plant cells also have a cell wall, and this cell wall is outside of the cell membrane. It helps to give it shape and support. Alright, this brings us to the end of 6.2. Okay, next week when you come back, please remember to bring your chapter 6 notes as well as your cutout completed diagrams of your plant and animal cells, as well as your practical and theory workbook so that we can continue with 6.3. Thank you very much and have a good day.